Welcome ladies and gents, Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter for boxing related tweets, or of course you can subscribe to the channel. Let's talk boxing. Let's talk about Beterbiev's destruction of Marcus Browne. You know, at face value, at first glance, it looks like we got it pretty spot on, right? In the preview, I had a lot of people say, great analysis, you made a great call, you hit the nail on the head. And as much as I would love to come here and tell you that my analysis was perfect and everything I told you that would happen, as much as I'd love to say that, I don't actually see it that way. And I'll explain why. There were a number of things we got correct. We spoke about in the preview how I felt that Marcus Browne would come out and start to perform quite well early on. He's got very good distance control. He's active with that lead hand. He jabs well with it, and that he would be able to find a lot of success against Artur Beterbiev, who tends to like to plod forward at times, and his tempo isn't always great early in the fight. But that as the fight wears on, Beterbiev will start to really step in with the shots, start to chop down at Marcus Browne essentially, and wear him down and stop him in the last 4 rounds. Well, we also spoke about the fact that when that would happen, the process of one of the things that Beterbiev is capable of doing is putting a guy onto his back foot, whereby his weight shifts beyond the line of his back foot, so that he's not retreating in a manner where he's leaning back, but his weight is still beneath the back foot and he's able to come back with a counter, nor is he retreating with his feet beneath him in a narrow stance, but rather that he starts to move back the fighter in a way whereby he's off balance. Additionally, we spoke about how Marcus Browne tends to like to have a stance which is quite side on, and the negatives of that are that to bring the backhand into play, you have to bring about extra rotation. Otherwise, to land it, the opponent's going to be closer to you. You're not going to have as much of a reach with it that way. And that when he tends to turn in that manner, he will meet Beterbiev in the pocket. And so when he tries to throw a power punch, he's going to struggle, or at least start to get caught. Now, when Beterbiev then starts to force him back with his consistent pressure as he begins to up his tempo and the powerful shots start to land and start to take significant effect, well, in that regard, you end up with a situation whereby the fighter is moving back in a manner where he can't actually set his feet to throw a punch. Now, all these things you saw occur last night. So that part was all accurate. The analysis of that part was accurate. The bit that was inaccurate, however, wasn't even a prediction. The fight stopped in the 9th round. Last 4 rounds, right? So even that part was accurate. But the process in which it got to that point wasn't accurate. I felt that Marcus Browne would have more success early on. He did have success early on in the first 3 rounds. But that Beterbiev would struggle to go through the gears initially and start to take risks and then start to close the gap. Instead, what happened is that Beterbiev got cut via that clash of heads, which was a terrible cut and terrible work from the cut man, by the way. I was cracking. He was taking the towel, rubbing up that cut, making it worse. At one point, he was getting the Vaseline, just smothering it across his face. And what was he doing? There was no delicate element there to try and sort out the cut. He was making it worse. But anyway, the point is, when that occurred, they told Beterbiev, listen, we're going to give you one more round. They were going to go to the scorecards if it was to go that far. So now Beterbiev's got some urgency, and he starts to up his own tempo. He starts to bring his feet closer more quickly. He's stepping in with that power jab. In other words, the area that I got wrong is not that he had to work to cut down Marcus Browne to get close to him. Rather, he just needed to show more urgency. So whether I undermined Beterbiev's ability to go through the gears, or whether I overestimated Marcus Browne's ability to keep him at bay, the fact of the matter is the cut was the turning point. It wasn't a systematic, gradual progression towards the destruction of Marcus Browne. Rather, Marcus Browne was doing well, and then there was a switch. And that's what I didn't see coming. Now, I then have to ask myself a couple of different questions. Has Beterbiev held back in the past? You know, is this guy who is being avoided thinking to himself, let me let people think that I'm slipping to get them into the ring with me? But then when he was finally in danger, he thought, right, well, now I don't have the luxury anymore to have a hidden hand. You know, I've got to go for this and I've got to show people what's what. Is that the case? Or is it a case of him taking ridiculous risks that he wouldn't have gotten away with against a superior fighter? Now, there's been a lot of talk potentially about fighting a guy like Canelo Alvarez, or stepping in with these long power jabs, carelessly at points against a counterpuncher like Canelo. He could start to get seriously caught, particularly to the body. And this is a guy that struggled to make weight. So I can envisage a way in which Canelo gives him problems. However, Ishii Smith felt that there's no way that he beats Canelo Alvarez. That I have to disagree with. Because Beterbiev, unlike anyone else Canelo has faced, does affect your construct. He will fall into you if he misses the shot. Now, you might counter him with 1 or 2 shots for sure, but he will fall into you, and he's very physically strong. You could see when he was on the inside, Marcus Browne, who was a big super middleweight, right? Canelo is not naturally a big super middleweight. Marcus Browne was a big super middleweight. When he was falling into him, there was a physical mismatch there. He has the ability, even with these short cupping shots, right? You saw also, I spoke in the preview about how he curves the wrist to make sure that Soviet style, to make sure he lands really the knuckle. When he was doing it up close at points, he didn't even have the chance to curl the wrist. It would just be almost like a cupping shot with the inside of the glove. It's almost like a slap. And even those shots are having serious effects. The point is, Canelo would have to do an awful lot early on. The longer the fight wears on, the harder it would become for Canelo. And Beterbiev's the sort of guy that can set a tempo, clearly, as we've seen. I didn't think that was the case. I thought he's one-paced, and although his hand speed is quite one-paced, he showed his ability to really step on the gas with his feet. Now, if he forces Canelo to have to work, well, then Canelo better knock him out. Because even in round 7 against Caleb Plant, he needed a break. He had a long period of time, a good minute or so. And that's a long time in a round, man. That's like a third of the round. Even if it was less than that, 40 seconds, whatever it was a long time where he was very inactive in that round against Caleb Plant. Now, against guys where he is imposing his physical prowess and his punch and power, when you take a break, they're almost scared to come at you because they've taken such a punishment already. They're thankful for the break. They're seeing it as their own break, right? When they really should be putting their foot on the gas. With Beterbiev, you're not going to get that. Beterbiev would continue to come forward. He wouldn't get that break. He'd get inside. He'd lean on him. The wide base and the upper body movement, he'd push him quite literally, get on top of him, try and break his construct, force Canelo to fight, land to the body, land these cupping shots that are clearly very heavy. He's clearly very heavy-handed. Now, Abel Sanchez once said that Gennady Golovkin is at least as physically strong in terms of grappling as Beterbiev. He said, you don't realize how physically strong Golovkin is. Now, as fantastic as Golovkin is as a fighter, and technically speaking, he's better than Beterbiev. I don't think he's as heavy-handed as Beterbiev, but technically speaking, he's better than Beterbiev. One of the best jabs you'll ever see, to be honest with you, one of the best in the business. Despite that, apart from head control, Golovkin isn't really a guy that imposes physicality on you in terms of really affecting your body construct, tie you up, lean on you, move you into another position that you don't want to be in. That's not really Golovkin's game, right? Golovkin comes in behind a very solid jab and throws vicious hooks from a wide trajectory that come around the guard often, and even from diagonal manner sometimes, right? An unusual trajectory of powerful hooks that you can't see coming. And he can drop a little uppercut in there too, and then, to disguise a body shot and things like that. He's destructive on the inside, but he wants that little bit of space in a mid-range rather than right up on your chest. But Beterbiev doesn't mind being right up on your chest. He's physically a very strong man, even if Golovkin's as strong as him, according to Abel Sanchez. That might be hyperbole, of course. Golovkin doesn't use that physical strength in the same manner, right? So would Canelo be able to last the 12 rounds against Beterbiev that we saw last night if Beterbiev is willing to put his foot on the gas and really set a tempo like he was against Marcus Browne? I'm not so sure. And I think maybe this is the reason that Canelo has decided, let me bypass Bivol, who's very skilled and a master of distance control. Let me bypass the likes of Beterbiev because of the physicality, and let me go to Makabu. Now, a lot of people are going to say, you're hating Chris. How can you mug off a guy for wanting to fight a champion at cruiserweight? Listen, if he beats Makabu, I'll give him massive props, no doubt about it. But I do want to see a fair and level playing field. You see, there is one method in which Canelo, I would fancy him to beat Beterbiev and fancy him to beat Ilunga Makabu. And that is if there is a significant catch weight 190 pounds, for instance. I know the WBC are talking about that as a potential. He hasn't made 190 for a very long time, Makabu. Now, if they bring it down to bring Makabu down to 190 pounds, and then there is also a rehydration clause, what you're ultimately saying to the opponent is, I want you to dehydrate yourself to the point where you are no longer capable of operating to your maximum physical ability. And I do not want you to be able to drink enough water, essentially, to be able to be healthy on the night. The cerebral spinal fluids will also diminish, which means what surrounds the brain, the cushion, so to speak, will also be diminished, which brings about stamina issues, reaction time issues, punch resistance issues. Now, if they start doing things like this for whatever reason, if Beterbiev is stupid enough to accept that sort of money because he wants a massive payday, or it happens with Makabu and he's sitting there thinking, I want that Canelo payday, well then yes, Canelo may very well beat them. But if Beterbiev was to come in at full strength, fair weight, no rehydration clause, none of that, and it was to be a fight, Canelo would have to get things done very, very early, because the rest of the fight, the longer it progresses, the harder the fight would become for Canelo. Beterbiev is genuinely a monster, even if he doesn't appear to be in many regards. He's not technically the best fighter in the world. I've said this already in the preview video. But as a brawler, as a brute, the man's a caveman. And he's got that caveman strength. Let me know what you thought. Where do you want Marcus Browne to go from here as well, by the way? He looked like a beaten down man. And he's always struck me. You look at Marcus Browne in some of his other fights against Shawnee Monahan, against Badu Jack. You know, you look at him in other fights. There's an arrogance to him. You know, there's a self-belief. That sort of a beatdown is a sort of thing that can stay with you psychologically. How do you overcome that? Right? And this is something that I've said in the past about other fighters who are very confident too. You don't have to be arrogant, but confident. Guys like George Kambosos, I've mentioned this about as well. If George Kambosos was ever to get knocked out, like battered and knocked out, I worry about his mental ability to bounce back from that. Because when you have this aura of, I'm an alpha male, and someone else alphas you, well, all of a sudden you start to question everything you ever believed about yourself. And we're going to see that with Marcus Browne here, because although he was a boxer puncher, but there was an element of great self-belief about him. Did he have that battered out of him last night? And let me know what you think about Beterbiev as well. Did you see any signs of decline or aging? Did you see anything that concerned you in any way with regards to him moving forward? Perhaps you thought it was a very good performance, but like Ishii Smith, you saw some things that made you think Canelo's got this, or whoever else in the light heavyweight division. Another fight that would be a terrific fight to watch, just in terms of a spectacle, is Beterbiev versus Anthony Yarde. Because Beterbiev, whatever you say, yes, he can show he can put his foot on the gas whenever he wants. He will eat a shot to get his own shot off. And it did take him a few rounds, even if there was that urgency. We didn't see him start quickly again. Well, Anthony Yarde, we know can start quickly. We saw it against Lyndon Arthur. Very heavy-handed guy. He's not as technically gifted as Beterbiev, even though Beterbiev is not some elite-level boxer. He's not as technically gifted, but he's got that physicality and that athleticism, and he's got the power to knock anybody out. So what happens if Beterbiev is eating those shots early, right? He would have to step his foot on the gas just like he did against Marcus Browne. But unlike Marcus Browne, Anthony Yarde has the power to clean anyone's clock in the light heavyweight division. So you're talking about a war for however long it lasts. That would be a great fight. Let me know what you think, ladies and gents. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.